Then you will bleed truth before the pack." The words hung in the vaulted hall like an executioner's blade, sharp and final and impossible to take back. I stood there in my wedding gown, white silk threaded with thornmarch red, crushed moon petals still woven into my hair, and I could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stare at the man who had just condemned me in front of everyone I had ever known. Cale. My alpha. My mate. The man I was supposed to marry today. His eyes were cold as winter stone. No warmth, no recognition, no flicker of the tenderness I had seen just hours ago. The torches lining the great hall flickered wildly, casting shadows that twisted across the carved wolves in the pillars. The black wolf at his side sat motionless, amber eyes locked on me, unblinking. The crowd gasped and whispered, a rising tide of shock and hunger. I heard my name spoken like a curse. I heard words I could not quite grasp, murmurs that buzzed like insects against my skin. How did this happen this morning I woke as a bride? The dawn had broken pale and cold, spilling light through the frost-etched windows of my chamber in Thornmarch. My mother's maids had fluttered around me like nervous sparrows, their hands quick and gentle as they fastened the laces of my gown, white silk, threaded with veins of crimson. Thornmarch red, my mother called it. The color of hawthorn berries in first snow. The color of promises kept. "Hold still, child," old Mira had murmured, weaving my mother's ribbon into my braid. Her fingers smelled of rosemary and smoke. "You're trembling." "I'm happy," I told her, though my voice came out thin as morning mist. I was happy. Gods above and stone below, I was. Today was not just a ceremony. It was the end of 100 years of border wars, the joining of Thornmarch and Blackspire, Iron and Fang, Earth and Moon. My marriage to Cale was meant to be the vow written in flesh, no more blood between our packs. I had met Cale only twice before. Once, when I was 15 and he came to negotiate the timber trade. All shoulders and scars and a voice like distant thunder. And again last autumn, when he stood in my father's hall and looked at me across the fire as if I were something worth keeping. He had said my name carefully, the way you hold a thing you are afraid to break. Isla. Like the sound alone mattered. I remembered standing with him under the pines that night, frost glittering on the branches above us, his breath clouding white in the cold. He had looked at me with something I wanted to believe was tenderness. "No war between our packs ever again," he had said, his hand brushing mine. "I swear it, Isla, on the moon and the stone beneath us." That had been enough. I had spent months embroidering that memory into something I could believe in, something I could build a life around. But I had also heard the stories, the whispers about Cale's ruthlessness in battle, the way he had torn through rogue packs that dared cross his borders, the way his black wolf was said to be his soul made flesh, merciless and unforgiving. I wondered sometimes which version of him I would get as a husband, the man who spoke my name like a prayer, or the alpha who showed no mercy. When the bells tolled the hour, I descended the winding stair of Thornmarch's keep, my heart beating so loud I thought the stones would hear it. Every step felt holy. Every breath felt borrowed from a future I had not yet earned. The ceremony was to be held in Blackspire's great hall, the one my ancestors had built with their own hands, mining the pillars from the quarry that still bore our blood in its bones. I had never been inside. Father said it was the most beautiful place in the north. He was right. The vaulted ceiling arched high as a cathedral, carved with wolves mid-hunt, their eyes inlaid with chips of amber that gleamed like embers in the torchlight. Pillars thick as ancient oaks lined the aisle, each one etched with pack sigils older than memory. The scent of pine and smoke and fir hung heavy in the air. Stained glass windows bathed the hall in rivers of colored light, blues and golds and deep, blood-dark reds. The entire pack had gathered. Warriors in leather and iron, elders draped in wolf pelts, mothers clutching babes swaddled against the cold. Every face turned toward me as I walked the long aisle toward the moon's arch, where silver light poured through the windows like a blessing, and at the center, beneath that arch, stood Cale. He looked carved from shadow and stone, broad-shouldered leather strapped across his chest, the black ceremonial cloak hanging from his frame like folded wings. His hair, dark as midwinter, was tied back, and his jaw was set in that way that made him look both ancient and ageless. At his side sat the black wolf, the one they whispered was his soul made flesh. Its eyes burned amber gold, unblinking, watching. When Kale's gaze found mine across the hall, something softened. Just for a breath. Just enough that I thought, maybe this will be real. The elder raised his gnarled staff, his voice rolling through the hall like distant thunder. We gather beneath the blessed moon to witness the binding of Alpha Kale of Blackspire and Isla of Thornmarch. Their union shall seal the blood pact and honor the moon's decree. My pulse thrummed in my throat as I stepped forward, the hem of my gown whispering against the flagstones. Every eye in the hall watched. I could feel their hope pressing against my skin like heat from a forge. The elder turned to me, his face lined with centuries of decisions. Isla of Thornmarch, he intoned, do you take Kale of Blackspire as your mate and husband, to stand beside him, to honor his name, and to bind your soul to his for as long as the moon shall rise? I do. My voice came out steady, clear as winter water. I smiled through the tightness in my chest, joy and terror braided so close I could not tell them apart. Then the elder turned to Kale, staff raised, ready to seal what had been promised for so long. And you, Kale of Blackspire, do you take Isla of Thornmarch as your Luna and wife? Stop! The words shattered the hall like iron on stone. Every head turned. The elder's staff froze mid-arc. My breath caught. 2 warriors dragged a figure forward through the crowd, stumbling, bleeding, face swollen with bruises. My stomach dropped. I knew that face. Fen. I had known him since childhood. We had traded apples at the autumn market, raced through Thornmarch's meadows, laughed over spilled cider in my mother's kitchen. He had left years ago to guard the southern trails. He was not supposed to be here. He was not supposed to be this, beaten, bound, thrown at the Alpha's feet like a slaughtered hare. Fen? My voice cracked. I took a step forward. The black wolf rose, lips peeling back in a warning snarl. The beta stepped from the shadows beside Kale, his face smooth as river stone, his smile thin and sharp. He held something in his hands. A bronze cup. A slim vial of glass that caught the torchlight like a splinter of ice. Found beyond the North Watch, the beta said, his voice dripping with false sorrow, with treasonous scent on him. And this, he lifted the vial, proof of conspiracy. The hall rippled with gasps. He was seen, the beta continued, turning now to face the crowd. With her. Last night. Alone. The word hung in the air like smoke. I shook my head. No. But the beta was not finished. He held the vial higher, his voice ringing. Her scent is woven through his. Thornmarch herbs, hearth smoke. Every thread of it wrapped around this man. She brought him into our borders. She conspired. Betrayal. No. Louder this time. My hands were shaking. That's a lie. Fen coughed, his voice coming out shredded. I was not. A fist slammed into the back of his skull. He crumpled. I lunged forward. The black wolf snapped at the air between us, teeth gleaming. Kale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Is it true? I turned to him, desperate, searching his face for the man who had looked at me like I mattered. He was gone. In his place stood the Alpha, cold, unyielding, carved from the same stone as the hall around us. Kale, please. Did you bring him here? His words were iron, no warmth, no question, just accusation dressed as inquiry. No. Did you conspire against my pack? No. Then explain his scent. Explain why your hearth smoke clings to a man who was found with proof of treachery. I cannot explain a lie. My voice broke. Someone is framing us. The beta's smile widened. He turned to Kale, bowing slightly. She mocks your name before the pack, my Alpha. She brings shame to Blackspire and calls it innocence. The crowd murmured, whispers like wind through dry leaves. I heard the words clearly. Thornmarch spy. Traitor. Kale's jaw tightened. His hand moved toward his belt. Do you submit to trial? He asked quietly. Yes. I forced the word past the stone lodged in my throat. Yes, I submit. Let the elders decide in private. Let them question. No. The word hit me like a fist. And then I was back in the present moment, the full weight of what he had just said crashing down on me like a collapsing mountain. Then you will bleed truth before the pack. His voice rose to fill every corner of the vaulted hall. Here, now, where every wolf could see. The elder tried to speak. My alpha, perhaps. Kale's growl silenced him. I realized, standing there in white, that this had been decided long before I walked down the aisle. The trial was not a trial. It was theater. And I was the performance. Kale, I whispered. Please. He did not look at me. He looked past me, over me, through me to the wolves who loved a spectacle more than they loved truth. The crowd began to murmur, approval and hunger rising like a wave. They wanted this. They wanted to see what betrayal looked like, what justice felt like, what blood tasted like when it was spilled in the name of the pack. Kale stepped forward. His hand moved toward something at his belt, fingers closing around leather and steel. The torchlight caught on metal, a flash of silver that made my heart stop. The black wolf rose from its place at his side, amber eyes fixed on me, teeth bared. I looked down at my gown, white silk threaded with thornmarch red, crushed moon petals still clinging to my hair. The ribbon my mother had braided into my braid that morning, her hands trembling with joy. This was supposed to be my wedding. The crowd in that hall watched me fall and did nothing. You just watched too. But you have a choice they didn't. Subscribe if you want to see me rise. Like if you refuse to let betrayal win. Share if you believe my story deserves to be heard. Don't be part of the silence. The hall became a courtroom of wolves. The elders stood silent along the edges, their faces carved from the same stone as the pillars behind them. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply watched, as if they had seen this play out 1,000 times before and knew how it would end. The pack pressed closer, bodies crowding the aisle, voices rising in a chant that started low and grew louder with each passing breath. Justice, justice, justice. The word became a drumbeat, a heartbeat, a living thing that filled every corner of the vaulted hall. I could feel it vibrating through the flagstones beneath my feet, crawling up my spine, wrapping around my throat like a hand squeezing tight. Kale moved toward me with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator closing in on wounded prey. His shadow stretched long across the floor, swallowing the light. In his hands he held the ceremonial chain. The one meant to bind us. The one that should have been wrapped around our joined wrists as we spoke our vows beneath the moon's arch. Silver links forged in the heart of Thornmark's oldest forge, blessed by the elders, anointed with oil pressed from hawthorn berries. It was supposed to symbolize unity. Now, as KL looped it twice around my wrists and pulled, it became something else entirely. The metal bit into my skin, cold and unyielding. I stumbled forward, my knees buckling, and suddenly I was kneeling at his feet. The white silk of my gown pooled around me like spilled milk. The moon petals in my hair scattered across the stone. The crowd roared its approval. I looked up at Kale, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Kale, I whispered, please, you know me. You know I would never... The beta leaned in close to Kale's ear, his voice a low murmur I could barely hear beneath the chanting. She mocks your name before rogues, my alpha. She makes you look weak. The pack will lose faith if you show mercy to a traitor. Kale's jaw tightened. His eyes, those eyes that had looked at me with something I wanted to believe was tenderness, were now empty. Hollow. As if he had carved out every soft thing inside himself and left only stone. I did nothing wrong, I said, louder now, desperate. I swear it. I swear it on the moon, on the stone, on my mother's grave. I did nothing. Then why does the evidence speak against you? Kale's voice was cold, flat, devoid of emotion. Why does your scent cling to a rogue found with poison meant for my sentries? Why were you seen with him in the dark when you should have been preparing for our union? I was not... Silence. The word cracked through the air like a whip. The beta stepped forward, holding the vial high so the entire hall could see it. The glass caught the torchlight, glinting like a shard of ice. The pack demands justice, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. The moon demands truth. And truth, my alpha, must be paid for in blood. The crowd chanted louder. Justice, justice, justice. Kale reached for his belt. His fingers closed around the hilt of a silver dagger, the blade etched with runes older than any of us. It was a ceremonial weapon, meant for rituals, for oaths spoken in blood, for bonds sealed beneath the light of the full moon. He drew it slowly, deliberately, the metal singing as it left the sheath. The crowd fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and frantic, echoing in the sudden stillness. I could hear the crackling of the torches, the faint rustle of fur and leather, the slow, measured breathing of the black wolf watching me with unblinking amber eyes. Kale knelt before me, his face so close I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the one he got in a skirmish with rogues when he was barely 16. I had traced that scar with my fingertips once, in a dream I had allowed myself to believe might come true. "If you are innocent," he said quietly, so quietly that only I could hear, "the moon will not abandon you." "The moon does not decide if you listen," I whispered back. "You do." His hand moved to the collar of my gown. He hooked a finger beneath the silk and pulled it aside, baring my left shoulder, exposing the place where the Luna mark had been inked at birth. Thornmarch's spiral of hawthorn and flame, soft as a kiss beneath my clavicle. The mark of my bloodline, my heritage, my connection to the earth and stone and ancient roots that ran deeper than any pack bond. He pressed the blade to my skin. Kale. The first cut was fire. White-hot and unbearable, searing through flesh and bone and every soft thing I had tried to protect inside myself. I gasped, my body going rigid, my hands clenching into fists against the chain that bound my wrists. The smell hit me next. Burned hawthorn, scorched wildflowers. The acrid stench of silver meeting blood, of metal carving through something sacred. The second cut was worse. It felt like he was peeling away layers of my soul, stripping me down to nothing, exposing every raw and bleeding part of me to the cold air and the watching eyes and the jeering crowd. And then the third cut came, slicing through the spiral's heart, and the pack bond tore. It did not break gently. It did not fade like a candle snuffed out. It ripped, violent and sudden, like a limb torn from a body, like roots wrenched from soil. The voices I had always heard humming at the edge of my awareness, the low, constant chorus of wolves singing to one another across distance, the pack bond that connected us all in an invisible web of sound and scent and feeling, went silent. The world did not dim. It went flat. Everything lost its color, its warmth, its depth. I could still see the hall, still hear the crowd, still feel the pain radiating from my shoulder, but it was all wrong. Distant, hollow. As if I were watching it happen to someone else from very far away. I tasted stone and ash and the deep, airless cold of water right before it freezes. Kale let me fall. I hit the flagstones hard, my palms slapping against the stone, my breath knocked from my lungs. The chain clinked and rattled, still binding my wrists. Blood ran warm down my chest, soaking into the white silk that had once shimmered with promise. The black wolf padded closer, its massive head lowering until I could feel its breath hot against my face. It snarled, low and rumbling, a sound that spoke of severed bonds and broken oaths. Kale stood, rising to his full height, the dagger still in his hand, my blood still wet on the blade. "By the will of Blackspire," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "Isla of Thornmarch is severed. She is no mate of mine and no Luna of this pack." The crowd erupted. They cheered. They howled. They stamped their feet and beat their fists against their chests, a cacophony of approval that shook the very foundations of the hall. They cheered as if I had done a trick for them, as if my blood was entertainment, as if my breaking was a gift. "Drive her past the pines," Kale continued, turning away from me as if I were already gone. "And if she returns, let the rogues have her. She is no longer under my protection." The warriors moved forward, their hands rough as they hauled me to my feet. My legs would not hold me. My body would not obey. They dragged me down the aisle, my feet trailing behind, leaving a smear of red across the white stone. The crowd parted to let us through, their faces a blur of twisted satisfaction and righteous fury. Someone spat at me. Someone else laughed. I tried to find my father's face in the crowd, tried to find anyone who might speak for me, who might step forward and say this was wrong, this was madness, this was a mistake. No one moved. The great doors of the hall swung open, and the cold hit me like a wall. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, covering the courtyard in white. The warriors dragged me through it, my blood trailing behind like a ribbon unfurling, bright red against the pristine snow. They did not stop until we reached the edge of the pines, where the path narrowed and the forest grew dark and deep. One of them leaned in close, his breath reeking of ale and malice. "Run," he whispered. "It's more fun when you run." I did not run. I walked. Step by step, breath by breath, into the cold and the silence and the dark. Behind me, Blackspire's bells began to toll, a mournful sound that echoed through the trees. Ahead of me, the forest waited, and somewhere, deep in the marrow of my bones, something older than the moon bond stirred. The guards left me at the frozen border, where the stones stood like crooked teeth marking the edge of Blackspire's territory. "Good luck with the rogues," one of them called over his shoulder, laughing. "They like pretty things, especially broken ones." Their footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed by the snow and the wind and the vast, indifferent silence of the forest. I stood there for a long time, my wrists still raw from the chain, my shoulders still bleeding through the torn silk of my gown. The cold bit through the thin fabric, sinking into my skin, settling deep in my bones. I should have been afraid. I should have been weeping, screaming, clawing at the stones and begging the moon for mercy. But I felt nothing. The place where the pack bond had been was empty now. A hollow space in my chest, an absence so profound it was almost physical. I could still remember what it felt like, that low hum of voices always present at the edge of my awareness, the comforting knowledge that I was never truly alone. Now there was only silence. I started walking, one foot in front of the other. The snow crunched beneath my bare feet, each step sending sharp jolts of pain up my legs. I did not know where I was going. I did not know what I was looking for. I only knew that I could not stay here, at the border, waiting for rogues or cold or despair to finish what Kale had started. The forest pressed in around me, dark and close. The pines stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow. No birds sang, no wind stirred the branches. Even the wolves, if they were out there, made no sound. I walked until my legs began to tremble. I walked until my vision blurred and my breath came in ragged gasps. I walked until I could no longer feel my feet, until the pain in my shoulder became a dull, throbbing ache that spread through my entire body, and then I collapsed. My knees hit the snow first, then my hands, then my entire body folding in on itself like a house of cards falling. I lay there, half buried in the drift, staring up at the sky through the gaps in the branches. The moon was out, pale and cold and distant. It did not look down at me with mercy. It did not offer comfort or guidance or hope. It simply hung there, indifferent, a silver coin suspended in an endless black void. A memory surfaced, unbidden. My mother, kneeling beside me in the garden behind our house in Thornmarch. I was young, maybe 6 or 7, and I had scraped my knee on a stone while chasing my brother through the rows of hawthorn bushes. She had pressed her palm to the earth beside me, her fingers digging into the soil, and closed her eyes. "What are you doing?" I had asked, sniffling. "Listening," she had said. "Thornmarch blood binds the earth itself, Isla. We are more than wolves. We are warders, keepers of the old stones, daughters of the quarry and the forge. When the moon turns her face away, the stone remembers. The earth holds." I had not understood then. I had been too young, too eager to run and play, and forget the scraped knee and the dirt under my nails. But now, lying in the snow with my blood seeping into the frozen ground, I understood. The moon had turned her face away, but the earth was still here. I pressed my palm to the snow, pushing through the cold white surface until I felt stone beneath. It was rough and ancient, weathered by centuries of wind and rain and the slow, patient march of time. I closed my eyes. "Please," I whispered. "Please, I have nothing left. No pack, no bond, no home. If you can hear me, if any part of what my mother said was true, please, give me strength." For a long moment, nothing happened. And then the stone vibrated. It was faint, barely perceptible, like the rumble of distant thunder or the tremor of an earthquake felt from miles away. But it was there, real, undeniable. I opened my eyes. The stone beneath my palm was warm now, radiating heat that seeped into my frozen fingers, thawing the numbness, bringing feeling back to my limbs. I could feel something else, too. A pulse. A rhythm. Not the pack song, not the chorus of wolves singing across distance, but something deeper, older, more fundamental. The heartbeat of the earth itself. A howl rose in the distance, long and mournful and utterly alone, but it did not sound like a wolf. It sounded like wind through a canyon, like water running over stone, like the groan of ancient rock shifting beneath the surface. I pushed myself up, my arms shaking with the effort. Snow clung to my hair. my dress, my skin. Blood still seeped from the wound on my shoulder, but slower now, as if even my body knew it was time to stop bleeding and start surviving. I looked around, trying to orient myself, trying to remember the stories my father used to tell about this part of the forest, and then I saw it, the old quarry. It rose out of the snow like the bones of some ancient creature, all broken pillars and shattered stone and yawning pits that dropped down into darkness. This was where Thornmark had mined the stone for Blackspire's Hall, where my ancestors had worked with hammer and chisel and sweat and blood to carve out the pillars that now held Kael's roof aloft. My mother had been born here, her mother before her. Generations of Thornmarch women had walked these paths, breathed this air, pressed their palms to these stones. I stumbled toward the nearest pillar, a massive column of granite that had been cut but never moved, left here to weather and crack and slowly sink back into the earth. I pressed both palms to its surface. The warmth flooded through me again, stronger this time. I could feel the memories embedded in the stone, layer upon layer of hands that had shaped it, voices that had sung over it, blood that had been spilled in offering and accident and birth. I could feel my mother's hands, my grandmother's, women whose names I did not know but whose blood ran in my veins, whose strength had built the very hall that had cast me out. Tears finally came, hot and fast, spilling down my frozen cheeks. But they were not tears of despair, they were tears of recognition, of awakening, of something deep and primal and furious stirring in the hollow place where the pack bond used to be. "If the moon will not hear me," I whispered, my voice rough and raw, "maybe the stone will." The quarry answered with silence, but it was not an empty silence. It was the silence of something listening, waiting, preparing. I sank down at the base of the pillar, pulling my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around myself for warmth. The stone at my back radiated heat, keeping the worst of the cold at bay. I closed my eyes and let the earth hold me. And for the first time since Kael had carved through my Luna mark, I did not feel alone. 3 days passed in the quarry. I learned to measure time by the way frost formed on the broken pillars, by the rhythm of my own breathing, by the slow fade of pain in my shoulder as the wound began to close. The stone kept me warm enough to survive, though I could not explain how. I pressed my back against the granite column and felt heat seeping into my bones, as if the earth itself had decided I was worth keeping alive. On the third night, I heard footsteps. I tensed, my hand closing around a shard of broken stone, the only weapon I had. The footsteps were uneven, stumbling, accompanied by labored breathing and the sound of something heavy dragging through snow. A figure emerged from the darkness between the pillars. Fen. He collapsed a few feet from where I sat, his face a ruin of fresh bruises layered over old ones. Blood seeped from a gash above his left eye. His clothes were torn, his hands raw and bleeding. "Isla," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "You're alive." I crawled to him, my own pain forgotten. "What happened?" "How did you—" "They let me go." He coughed, spitting blood into the snow. "After the ceremony. Said I was useless now that you were gone. Threw me past the border and told me to die with you." I tore a strip of silk from the hem of my ruined wedding gown and pressed it against the wound on his head. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "No." He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You need to know. It was the beta. All of it. He scented me with your hearth herbs while I was sleeping. Planted the wolfsbane in my pocket. He wanted this. He planned it." My hands stilled. "Why?" "War." Fen's eyes were wild, fevered. "He wants Blackspire to invade Thornmarch. He told Kael your pack was plotting to break the treaty, that you were the proof. If Kael rejects you, denounces Thornmark, he can justify seizing your lands, the iron trade, the quarry, everything." The stone beneath my knees trembled. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but I felt it. A vibration that started deep in the earth and rippled outward, like a giant turning over in its sleep. "I heard them," Fen continued, his words coming faster now, desperate. "3 nights before the ceremony, the beta and 2 council members. They were in the war room, spreading maps across the table, marking Thornmark's borders, talking about supply routes and weak points in your defenses. They said Kael was too soft, too bound by his father's old treaties. They needed him angry, betrayed, ready to spill blood. I wrapped another strip of silk around his ribs, binding the worst of his injuries. My hands shook. "Cale doesn't know," I said quietly. It was not a question. He believes what they told him. Fen closed his eyes. "He thinks you betrayed him. He thinks Thornmark sent you to weaken Blackspire from within." The tremor came again, stronger this time. The column at my back hummed, a low resonant note that I felt in my chest, in my bones, in the hollow place where the pack bond used to be. And then I saw it, not with my eyes. With something deeper, flashes of memory that did not belong to me. Images carved into the stone itself, preserved like flies in amber, waiting to be read by someone who knew how to look. The dais in Blackspire's hall, the beta leaning close to Cale, whispering poison in his ear. A council chamber I had never seen, lit by firelight, 3 men standing over maps and speaking in low, urgent voices, the vial of wolfsbane changing hands. Fen's sleeping form, someone bending over him, pressing fabric soaked in hearth smoke against his skin. The visions came in fragments, disjointed and chaotic, but clear enough. The stone had witnessed it all. The pillars my ancestors had carved still stood in Blackspire's hall, still held up the roof, still remembered every word spoken in their shadow. I gasped, pulling my hand away from the column. "What is it?" Fen asked. "Isla, what's wrong?" "The stone," I whispered. "It remembers. It saw what they did." He stared at me as if I had lost my mind. "Stone doesn't see anything." "Thornmarch stone does." I pressed both palms to the granite again, closing my eyes, reaching for that thread of connection. "My mother told me once, we were warders before we were wolves. We bound the earth. We made it hold promises. And this stone, all of it came from here, from this quarry. It's still connected, still listening." Fen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Can you prove it? Can you show anyone else what you're seeing?" "I don't know." I opened my eyes. "But I'm going to learn." He nodded slowly, painfully. "Then I'll help you. Whatever it takes. We clear your name. We expose them. We make Kyle see the truth." I looked at him, this boy I had known since childhood, beaten and broken and abandoned in the snow, and felt something fierce and hot bloom in my chest. Not the pack bond, something older, loyalty, chosen, not born. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet." He managed a weak smile. "We might both die trying." I stood, pulling him up with me, letting him lean on my shoulder as we stumbled toward the shelter of the largest column. The stone was warm beneath my fingertips, thrumming with that strange, patient energy. I found a sharp piece of flint among the rubble and knelt before the column. My hand moved almost without thought, guided by instinct or memory or something passed down through generations of Thornmarch women who had knelt in this same place and done this same work. I etched a mark into the stone. A spiral, a line, a circle closing on itself. The column hummed. It was not a sound I heard with my ears. It was deeper than that, a vibration that ran through the ground and up through my knees and settled in the cage of my ribs like a second heartbeat. Fen stared at the mark, then at me. "What did you just do?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's listening now." Weeks passed in the quarry and I learned to speak the language of stone. It was not a language of words. It was older than that, a vocabulary of pressure and memory, of weight and time, of patience so profound it made the pack bond seem like a fleeting whisper. I practiced every day, drawing sigils with iron filings scraped from old tools left rusting among the rubble. I mixed the filings with chalk and snowmelt, creating a paste that I could press into the cracks and fissures of the pillars. Each mark I made was a question. Each hum I felt in return was an answer. The memories came back to me slowly, surfacing like bodies rising from deep water. My mother, teaching me the names of stones: granite, basalt, limestone, slate. Each one with its own voice, its own way of holding the past. My grandmother, pressing her palm to the hearth in our kitchen and closing her eyes, listening to the fire-warm stone teller who had walked through the house that day. Women further back than that, faces I did not know but whose blood I carried. The warders. The ones who had come before the wolves, who had bound the earth with oaths written in iron and sealed with blood. We were more than pack. We were keepers of the old ways, daughters of the quarry and the forge, and the moon was only one of many things we answered to. Fen healed slowly, his body mending itself with the stubborn resilience of youth. When he was strong enough to walk, he scouted the edges of the forest, mapping rogue territories, listening for rumors, bringing back whatever scraps of information he could gather. One night he came back bleeding again, 3 rogues on his trail. I did not think. I pressed my palm to the nearest pillar and whispered a command in the language the stone had taught me. The ground beneath the rogues' feet cracked. Stone erupted upward in jagged spikes, not high enough to kill but enough to trap, to bind, to hold them in place while Fen scrambled to safety. The rogues howled and thrashed, but the stone did not yield. Fen stared at me, his eyes wide. "How did you—" "Practice," I said, though my hands were shaking. We tested my craft every day after that. I learned to whisper truths into the quarry walls and hear them echo back, distorted but recognizable. I learned to press my ear to the stone and catch fragments of conversations happening miles away in Blackspire's hall, carried through the bones of the earth itself. I heard Kale's voice sometimes. It cut through me every time, sharp and clean as a blade. He sounded tired, hollowed out. He spoke of border raids and supply lines and missing sentries. He spoke of Thornmarch with cold anger, as if my entire pack were a wound that needed cauterizing. But once, late at night when he thought no one was listening, I heard him say my name. Just once. Soft, almost like a question. The guilt hit me then, sudden and overwhelming. I hated him for what he had done. I hated the beta for orchestrating it. I hated the crowd for cheering. But some small stupid part of me still remembered the way Kale had said my name that first time, like it mattered. Like I mattered. I told the stone to stop carrying his voice to me after that. It obeyed. By the time the first thaw began to melt the snow, I had carved a talisman from a piece of quarry granite. It was small enough to fit in my palm, etched with spirals and lines and circles that pulsed faintly when I held it. A pulse key, my grandmother would have called it. A way to break open truth and let it bleed into the light. Fen watched me work, his expression unreadable. When you use that, there's no going back. I know. Kale will see everything, the beta's treachery, his own failure to listen. It will break him. Good, I said, though my voice wavered. Let him break the way I did. Let him see what his judgment cost. Fen was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You still care about him?" "No." I closed my fist around the talisman. "I care about the truth. That's all." He did not argue, but I could see in his eyes that he did not believe me. I did not believe me either. I stood at the edge of the quarry, looking toward Blackspire in the distance. The hall rose like a shadow against the horizon, its towers stark and sharp against the pale sky. "Let them think they buried me," I whispered. "I will make the stones remember me louder." The quarry hummed in answer, patient and vast and older than the moon. We returned to Blackspire under cover of snowfall, cloaked in darkness and desperation. I had wrapped myself in what remained of my wedding gown, now dyed red with quarry dust, and my own dried blood. The silk clung to my skin, rough and stained, transformed from a bride's dress into a ghost's shroud. Fen walked beside me, his movements still stiff from healing ribs, his eyes sharp and watchful. The keep rose before us like a monument to everything I had lost. Its towers pierced the night sky, torches burning in the windows, smoke rising from 100 hearths. I could hear voices carrying on the wind, laughter and shouting and the clang of metal on metal from the training yards. Life continued in Blackspire as if I had never existed. "The servants' entrance," Fen whispered, pointing toward a narrow door set into the eastern wall. "The tunnels run beneath the entire keep. Laundry, kitchens, storage. They all connect to the Great Hall." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. We moved like shadows, slipping between buildings, pressing ourselves against stone walls when guards passed. The snow muffled our footsteps, erasing our presence almost as quickly as we created it. The servants' door was unlocked, as Fen had promised. We descended into darkness, feeling our way along damp stone walls, breathing air that smelled of mildew and old smoke. The tunnels were narrow, barely wide enough for one person to pass through comfortably. My shoulders brushed the walls on either side. Fen led the way, his hand outstretched, counting doorways and intersections by touch. I followed, my heart hammering against my ribs, the talisman heavy in my pocket. We emerged in a storage room beneath the great hall. Crates of grain lined the walls, barrels of salt pork and dried fish, sacks of flour stacked to the ceiling. The smell was overwhelming, earthy and animal and preserved. Above us I could hear footsteps, voices, the creak of wood and the scrape of furniture being moved. "They're preparing for something," Fen said quietly. I pressed my palm to the floor, closing my eyes, reaching for the stone beneath the wood and packed earth. The connection came easier now, as natural as breathing. The hall spoke to me in tremors and echoes, carrying sound through its bones. The beta's voice filtered down, cold and persuasive. "The Thornmarch prisoners confessed, my alpha. They admit to conspiring with the girl. They plan to weaken our borders from within, to make us vulnerable to rogue attacks while their pack mobilized for invasion." Kale's voice, heavy with something that might have been doubt. "And you're certain of this?" "The evidence is clear. Wolfsbane, maps of our territory, letters written in code. We have everything we need to justify retaliation." "War." Kale said the word like a curse. "My father spent his life building peace with Thornmarch. Your father is dead, my alpha, and the world has changed. Thornmarch grows bold. They see your mercy as weakness. If you do not act now, if you do not show strength, the other packs will sense blood in the water." Silence stretched above me, long enough that I thought Kyle might refuse. Then he spoke, his voice flat and resigned. "Bring the prisoners to the hall at dawn. We will hold trial and pass judgment before the pack." My hands clenched into fists. Fen touched my shoulder. "We need to move." We climbed the narrow stairs that led from the storage room to the great hall. The door at the top was locked, but Fen had brought tools, thin pieces of metal that he worked into the mechanism until something clicked. The hall was empty, lit only by moonlight streaming through the stained glass windows. The pillars cast long shadows across the floor. The dais loomed at the far end, dark and imposing. I moved quickly, pulling the chalk and iron filings from the pouch at my waist. I had prepared the mixture carefully, grinding the filings until they were fine as dust, mixing them with chalk and a few drops of my own blood to bind the ward. I knelt at the base of the first pillar and began to draw. Spirals, lines, circles closing on themselves. The marks glowed faintly in the moonlight, pulsing with the same rhythm as the talisman in my pocket. The stone hummed beneath my fingertips, recognizing the touch of Thornmarch hands. I worked my way around the hall, marking each pillar, weaving a web of memory and truth that would hold until I was ready to break it open. Fen kept watch, his back pressed to the wall, his eyes on the doors. When I reached the dais, I hesitated. This was where Kyle had stood when he condemned me. This was where I had knelt in my wedding gown and felt the silver dagger carved through my lunar mark. This was where my life had ended and something else had begun. I pressed my palm to the stone and whispered a command in the language the quarry had taught me. The dais shuddered, barely perceptible, absorbing the ward like water into sand. "Isla." Fen's voice was urgent. "Someone's coming." We ran, retracing our steps through the hall, down the stairs, through the tunnels. My lungs burned, my legs trembled. But we did not stop until we were outside again, breathing cold air, snow falling soft and silent around us. I looked back at the keep, my chest heaving. "Tomorrow," I said, "tomorrow they'll see." We found shelter in an abandoned grain shed at the edge of the territory, close enough to reach the keep quickly but far enough to avoid patrols. Fen built a small fire, shielding it with his body so the light would not be seen from a distance. I sat with my back against the wall, exhausted, every muscle in my body screaming. "You should rest," Fen said. "Dawn isn't far." I nodded, but I could not sleep. My mind raced, replaying everything I had heard, everything I had done, everything that would happen when the sun rose. Hours passed in silence. And then, faint and distant, I heard something that made my breath catch. Kale's voice. It was not carried through the stone this time. It was memory, surfacing unbidden, a fragment of something I had heard while kneeling at the dais. He had been alone in his chamber, the walls thin enough that the stone could hear him even there. He had been pacing, restless, unable to sleep, and then he had stopped. Saturday whispered a single word into the darkness. "Isla." Just my name, soft, almost like a question, almost like regret. I pressed my hands to my face, biting back the sound that wanted to escape my throat. It did not matter. It could not matter. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. The dawn bells began to ring, echoing across Blackspire, calling the pack to witness. Fen stood, offering me his hand. "Are you ready?" I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. "Yes," I said. "Let them see what they've done." The great hall filled with bodies as the sun rose, pale light filtering through the stained glass windows, painting the crowd in shades of blue and gold and blood red. It was the same crowd that had gathered for my mating ceremony, the same elders standing along the walls, the same warriors, the same mothers with babes in arms, the same eager faces hungry for spectacle. Kale stood on the dais, the black wolf at his side, his face carved from stone. Before him, chained and kneeling, were 3 prisoners, Thornmarch wolves, their clothes torn, their faces bruised, their eyes hollow with fear and exhaustion. The beta stood beside Kale, his expression smug and satisfied. He held a scroll in his hands, reading aloud the list of crimes. Conspiracy, treason, collaboration with rogues, attempted assassination of the Alpha. The crowd murmured, anger rippling through the hall like a living thing. Kale raised his hand, and silence fell. "You have heard the charges," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You have seen the evidence. The moon demands justice. The pack demands blood." He drew his dagger, the same silver blade he had used to carve through my Luna mark, and the crowd roared its approval. I stepped through the doors at the back of the hall. The roar died. Every head turned. Gasps echoed through the space, sharp and disbelieving. I heard my name whispered like a curse, like a prayer, like a ghost story told to frightened children. I walked down the aisle slowly, my head held high, the quarry dust still clinging to my red-stained gown. My feet were bare, my hair unbound, my shoulder marked with the scar where Kale had cut me. I looked like something dragged back from the dead. Kale's face went white. The dagger slipped from his fingers, clattering against the stone. "Isla," he said my name, like he did not believe I was real. "I demand the trial you denied me," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Here, now, before the pack." The beta recovered first, his expression twisting with fury. "Seize her. She was exiled. She has no right." "I have every right." I stopped at the base of the dais, looking up at Kale. "You said I would bleed truth before the pack. So let me bleed it." Kale's jaw tightened. He gestured to the guards. "Take her." They moved toward me, hands outstretched. I pressed my foot to the floor, and the stone beneath their boots cracked. Fissures spider-webbed outward, sharp and sudden, zigzagging across the flagstones with a sound like thunder. The guards stumbled, falling back, staring at the ground as if it had betrayed them. The crowd gasped, pressing closer, their shock giving way to fascination. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the talisman, holding it high so everyone could see. The granite pulsed in my palm, glowing faint and rhythmic, like a heartbeat made visible. "The stone remembers," I said. "Every word spoken in this hall, every lie, every truth. Let it speak." I closed my fist around the talisman and shattered it. The hall rang. It was not a sound. It was deeper than sound. A vibration that started in the pillars and spread through the floor and the walls and the vaulted ceiling, resonating in the bones of everyone present. The fissures I had seen in my visions began to open in earnest now, cracks spreading across the dais, light catching on hidden seams. Stone shifted, grinding against stone, revealing cavities that should not have existed. A vial rolled out from beneath the beta's feet, then another, and another. Glass containers filled with purple liquid, the unmistakable color of wolfsbane. The crowd gasped. Fen stepped forward from where he had been hiding in the shadows. "The beta planted these," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "He scented me with Isla's hearth smoke. He framed us both to start a war." Lies. The beta's face was red with fury. "He is a rogue. He would say anything." The stone shifted again, and this time carvings became visible in the pillars. Sigils I had not placed there, marks left by someone else, evidence of deals made in secret, of power bought and sold. The beta's sigil, repeated, everywhere. 2 sentinels pushed through the crowd, their faces pale. "He bribed us," one of them said, his voice barely audible. "Gold and promises." He told us to stand down the night the rogue was found. He said the Alpha ordered it. The second sentinel nodded, his hands shaking. We thought we were following orders. The Beta lunged toward them, rage contorting his features. The floor beneath him collapsed. Stone gave way, opening like a mouth, swallowing him to the waist and holding him fast. He thrashed and screamed, but the earth did not yield. Silence fell over the hall, thick and suffocating. Cale stared at the evidence scattered across the dais. The vials, the carvings, the confessions. His face was ashen, his hands trembling. He looked at me, and for the first time since the ceremony, I saw something other than cold judgment in his eyes. I saw devastation. Isla. His voice broke on my name. You can carve a bond out of flesh, I said quietly, but you cannot carve it out of truth. The black wolf lowered its head, amber eyes fixed on me, no longer snarling. Cale dropped to his knees. The pack followed, one by one, sinking to the floor not in reverence but in shame. I stood on the dais where I had been condemned, looking out at the sea of bowed heads, and felt nothing but cold, quiet clarity. The hall was silent except for the sound of breathing, hundreds of wolves inhaling and exhaling in rhythm, waiting for me to speak. The morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the crowd in shades of amber and crimson. The same light that had blessed my mating ceremony now illuminated my judgment. How strange, I thought, to stand where Cale had stood. To see what he had seen when he looked down at me kneeling in chains, bleeding in my wedding gown. The perspective was different from up here. Colder, more distant. It would be easy, from this height, to forget that the faces looking up at you belonged to people with beating hearts and complicated truths. It would be easy to become what he had been. But I would not. I took a breath and let it out slowly, feeling the stone beneath my feet hum in response, steady and patient. I demand restitution, I said, my voice carrying through the hall without strain. The stone helped, amplifying my words, making sure every wolf could hear. Thornmark's name will be cleared. Every lie spoken against my pack will be retracted publicly. The Beta's confession will be recorded and sent to every neighboring territory so all will know the truth of what happened here. The elders nodded, their faces grave, carved from the same weathered stone as the pillars around us. These prisoners. I gestured to the 3 Thornmarch wolves still kneeling before the dais, their chains clinking softly, will be released immediately and escorted home with full honor. An apology will be written in Cale's own hand and delivered to my father. Reparations will be sent south before the next moon rises. Grain enough to feed Thornmarch through winter. Iron from your forges. Timber from your forests. Whatever my pack needs to survive the damage your lies and paranoia have caused. I paused, letting the weight of my demands settle over the crowd like fresh snow. And you will send healers, I added, thinking of the families who had suffered while waiting for sons and brothers to return, wondering if they were traitors or victims. For those whose minds were broken by your interrogations, those who were tortured for confessions they never gave. A ripple of shame moved through the hall, heads bowed lower, shoulders curved inward. I turned to the Beta, still trapped waist-deep in stone, his face purple with impotent rage and humiliation. His hands clawed at the floor, trying to gain purchase, trying to pull himself free. The stone did not yield. It would not yield until I told it to. Exile, I said, and the word fell like an executioner's blade. Beyond the northern wastes where no pack will take him. Where snow falls year-round and the ground is too frozen to bury the dead, let the rogues have him. Let them teach him what it means to be cast out for crimes he actually committed, not ones manufactured to serve his ambition. The Beta's eyes bulged. You cannot. I can. My voice was ice. The stone answers to me now, and the stone says you will go north and you will never return. If you set foot in any pack territory, if you so much as breathe the air of civilization again, the earth itself will open beneath you and swallow you whole. He opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The stone had claimed even that from him. The crowd murmured approval, a low rumble of satisfaction that filled the hall like distant thunder. And the names? I continued, my voice rising so it reached the farthest corners, the highest galleries, every ear in the assembly. Every conspirator who helped the Beta orchestrate this betrayal. Every council member who stood silent when they should have questioned. Every warrior who raised his voice to chant for my blood without knowing the truth. Carve their names into these pillars. I gestured to the ancient columns my ancestors had mined from Thornmarch quarries, the bones of this hall, the foundation of Blackspire's pride. Carve them deep, I said, so they can never be erased. So every generation that comes after will see what happens when wolves choose spectacle over truth, when they choose the comfort of lies over the discomfort of doubt. Let this hall stand as a reminder that justice delayed is not justice denied, only justice waiting for someone brave enough to demand it. The elders bowed their heads in acceptance. The stonemasons in the crowd stepped forward, already reaching for their tools. Cale had been silent through all of this, kneeling on the dais where he had once stood as judge. Now he looked up at me, his face a ruin of guilt and grief, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Isla. My name came out broken. Please, I was wrong. I should have listened. I should have trusted you. I should have demanded proof before I let them turn me into... His voice caught. Before I became the thing I swore I would never be. You should have believed me, I said, and the words came out flat, final, empty of the heat I had carried in my chest for weeks. The anger had burned itself out in the quarry, transformed into something colder and more permanent. But you didn't. You chose their lies over my truth. You chose the crowd's approval over my life. You chose to be the alpha they wanted instead of the man you promised to be. He reached for my hand, his fingers trembling. I stepped back, and the small distance between us might as well have been an ocean. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said, his voice raw and desperate. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, Isla, let me make this right. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to— No. The word hung in the air between us, final as a door closing. I looked down at my shoulder, at the scar tissue where he had carved through my Luna mark. The skin had healed in jagged lines, pink and raised, a permanent reminder of the moment everything changed. Some part of me would always carry that pain. Some part of me would always remember the smell of burned hawthorn and the sound of the crowd cheering. You severed our bond, I said quietly. You cannot stitch it back together with apologies and good intentions. What's done is done. What's carved is carved. Then what do you want from me? His voice was barely a whisper, a plea that dissolved in the vast space of the hall. Tell me what you want and I'll give it. Anything. Everything. I met his eyes, those eyes that had once looked at me with something I had wanted so desperately to believe was love, and I felt nothing but a distant, echoing sorrow for the girl I used to be. I want you to live with what you've done, I said. I want you to wake every morning and see my name carved into these pillars. I want you to walk through this hall every day for the rest of your life and remember that the girl you condemned, the girl you cut and bled and cast into the snow, is the one who made the stone itself stand witness against your cruelty. I want you to carry that weight until it breaks you the way you broke me. I paused, letting him see the steel in my spine, the stone in my bones. And then I want you to rebuild yourself into someone better. His face crumpled. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead to the floor in the deepest gesture of submission a wolf could offer. I did not acknowledge it. I walked down from the dais, my bare feet silent on the stone, passing the kneeling crowd. They parted for me like water around a stone. The elders could not meet my eyes. The warriors stared at the floor. The mothers clutched their children closer, as if proximity to me might teach them something dangerous and necessary about standing your ground. Fen stood near the doors, tears streaming down his face, his smile bright despite the bruises still healing on his skin. I paused beside him. Thank you, I said quietly, for believing me when no one else would. Always, he whispered. The black wolf followed me to the doors, its massive paws silent despite its weight. When I reached the threshold, it lowered its head, amber eyes closing in something that looked unmistakably like respect. I had seen it snarl at me, threaten me, watch me bleed. Now it bowed. I placed my hand on its head, feeling the heat of fur and muscle and ancient, uncomplicated loyalty. It leaned into my touch, a low rumble vibrating through its chest, that was not quite a growl and not quite a purr. You were always wiser than your master, I whispered. You knew the truth before anyone else did. The wolf's eyes opened, amber catching the morning light, and for just a moment I swore I saw understanding there. Agreement. Apology. And then I walked out into the morning air. The world had transformed overnight. The snow had thawed completely, leaving the ground soft and dark and fertile. Green shoots pushed through the earth, early and impossible, as if spring had come months ahead of schedule in defiance of every natural law. Flowers I could not name bloomed along the path, their petals bright against the dark soil. The ground hummed beneath my bare feet, singing that deep, patient song I had learned to recognize. The earth was pleased. The earth remembered. Behind me, I heard Kale call my name one last time, his voice breaking on the syllables. I did not turn around. I walked until I reached the border stones, the place where the guards had dumped me and told me to die. The moss growing there was bright and impossibly green, covering the old gray lichen like a promise kept, like forgiveness offered by something older than pack politics and wounded pride. I knelt and pressed my palms to the earth, feeling it sing beneath my touch, feeling the memory of every Thornmarch woman who had ever done the same, reaching back through generations to the first warder who had learned that stone listens and earth remembers. At my mating ceremony, Kale had made me bleed before the pack. He had carved through my flesh and severed our bond and cast me into the snow to die, and the crowd had cheered as if my suffering were entertainment. But it was that blood that taught the earth to remember my name. And the earth, I had learned, had a much longer memory than the moon, and a much steadier love than any wolf could offer. I rose and turned south, toward Thornmarch, toward home, toward a future I would build with my own hands from quarry stone and iron and the old, patient magic my mother had tried to teach me, and I had finally learned to hear. Behind me, Blackspire's bells began to toll, a mournful sound that carried across the thawing landscape, mourning what they had lost when they chose spectacle over truth. Ahead of me, the earth hummed its approval, steady and certain and unshakable. And I walked forward, alone but not empty, marked but not broken, scarred but not defeated, into the morning light that belonged only to me.